Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host, Simon Conboy. Just continuing to plough on through the AFC South here with the first wave of free agency reviews. This episode will be focusing on the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts have come under a fair amount of scrutiny over the last couple of years, and rightfully so. Ryan Grigson no longer the GM of the team. Been very curious the way they've attacked the last few off seasons. It's clearly not worked out, sort of treating the team like it's in a win now mode simply because they've got Andrew Luck, not playing too many young players, preferring sort of quick fix options and veterans to try and get this team in Super Bowl contention. It's not really worked out. Saw last year this is a very, very talent poor roster. Frankly, it's just because Andrew Luck is as good as he is that this team is able to have any kind of success. Defensively, an absolute disaster. Vontae Davis, who's a good cornerback when healthy, struggled last year. I think you could see he wasn't quite right. No pass rush, struggled against the run. Safety play wasn't bad, that's about it. And on offense, the offensive line's slowly starting to get there. Castonzo's okay. He's not a liability on that line. Jack Mewhort's actually a very good guard, and Ryan Kelly, the first round pick, he played fine. I suspect he will continue to improve as he gets older. Of course, T.Y. Hilton's still a great player. Beyond that, Philip Dorsett's not worked out for them. Frank Gore still an okay running back, of course not nearly as explosive as he was in his prime, 34 at this point. Not a huge threat, but a solid contributor. And Dante Moncrief's okay. Again, I feel like a lot of that is Andrew Luck. He'll make these guys look better than they are at times. Dwayne Allen was signed last year, that didn't really work out. He's since been moved on. Offensive line started to show some signs of improvement last season at last after, nearly getting Andrew Luck killed the previous 2 years. There's still a huge need. I think this roster is one of those that's basically as bad as it gets. They're not that much further ahead than some of the teams, picking right at the beginning of the draft, like the Bears. I think, to be honest, the Bears probably have more overall talent. They're lucky they've got Andrew Luck. He is keeping this franchise looking respectable. It's hard to feel too much sympathy for Grigson. I think he's done a very poor job in the last few seasons. This team's going to look quite a lot different next season. A lot of those older veteran players' contracts were up this year. They're not coming back, and we've already seen the Colts really try to address the team with some of these moves. So big needs I had for them. Basically, I could put every position on defense, and that would be a reasonable thing for me to do, and I did, because that is the case. They need another running back. Frank Gore, he's 34. He's played better than any 34-year-old should in the last couple of seasons. They need to find somebody else to take over the reins. You wouldn't want him carrying the ball 25 times a game at this point. Need to continue to shore up the offensive line. Andrew Luck is the franchise, and I think they need to get some better weapons outside of T.Y. Hilton. Pretty much just about everything. So thus far, being reasonably active, shown restraint, and seem to be doing things differently, going for some not particularly named guys, signed to some pretty reasonable contracts, and it looks like there's a bit more of a vision in terms of the defence in particular with what they're doing with these signings. The biggest one, I guess, would be Jabal Shears coming over from the Patriots on a 3-year, $25 million deal. He'll be playing out on the edge for them. He's had some good years, had some bad years. It's hard to know quite what to make of him. Middling kind of player, I think, if you look at it on the balance of his career. Had issues last year in New England that led to him getting benched. I think it's a slight overpay, but when you lack talent like the Colts do on defense, I think you have to do that with a couple of players. He's an experienced guy at this point in his career. It's a reasonable signing. Don't know how well he'll necessarily fit the scheme I'm not sure he was a perfect fit in New England. But it's a veteran. It's better than what they've got, and it's not horrific, even though I do think it's a bit much. It's a bit rich for my blood, based on what I saw last season. They got John Simon, which is very much an under the radar move. Not a lot of people know who he is. He was basically the third rush backer for the Houston Texans and was quite productive in that role. Of course, it's going to be hard to really make a name for yourself when you've got Whitney Merciless and Clowney in front of you, because they were one of the best tandems in the league last season from those spots. But it's a very reasonable contract, 3 years, 13.5. This is the kind of move I like, where, I can't say it's going to be a slam dunk pick, but it's a player who's, there's some good things on tape. Getting him from a division rival as well. In theory, fits into what you're trying to do schematically. And, he's young. You're not paying him a huge amount of money. There's no risk to this. It's all upside. And, you've got a reason, to justify the decision you've made. This is the kind of move that they haven't been making in the last few years. I think this one could work out for them. If it doesn't, it's no real skin off their nose. Good move. Big fan of this signing. Al Woods, similar sort of thing. Nose tackle for the Titans. Not a world beater. He's not going to, stun anyone with an incredibly high level of play. I would hope they're going to go after one of the bigger names, maybe. I've seen Poe thrown out there as, then one of the teams interested in him. Hank, who I mention all the time because it just seems no one's interested. I don't know if there's something behind the scenes there. I don't know. Maybe he's ballooned in weight, as nose tackles sometimes do. But this is a 2-year, $5 million deal. Again, better than what they've got. Improves depth, low risk. Getting a player from a team within the division. Can't complain. Solid move. Robert Turbin's been re-signed. Small contract. He's just a guy in the backfield. Okay as a receiver. Not going to scare anyone. Just providing a bit more depth for them. Brought in Bukavius Mingo. 1 year, $2 million. He's shown nothing in his career, but he was drafted in the first round. There's got to be some talent there. Again, there's a need at the position. They're attacking it. These are the kind of deals I'm perfectly fine with. If it doesn't work out, which I don't suspect it will, he'll just head on either elsewhere or out of the league next off season. So again, solid move. So also two that I don't have contract information for, and they would be Magus Hunt, the giant defensive end who's done nothing in his time in Cincinnati. I assume again this is a similar deal to those. And centre Brian Schwenke. I don't know if they might try and make him into a guard or if he'll just provide depth. Before he got injured, he was actually quite a good player in Tennessee. So yeah, big fan of these moves. Not going for names, there's a degree of quantity there, but that's needed when I think, when the roster is as bad as it is. They're not going to take things as slow as some of these other rebuilding teams, of course, because there is Andrew Luck there. And you don't need a great roster to necessarily be a threat to make the playoffs. I think we saw that in his first few years, where they were more talented than they are now. But those weren't great teams. There's a reason they were able to get him first overall at the end of the day. So, yeah, I mean, they're better. They're certainly better than they were. Not an enormous amount, but these are the kind of under-the-radar moves that a couple more off-seasons like this, and they might look a lot better. If they'd be making these kind of moves, I don't think they'd be where they are now. In terms of players that are gone, of course, Robert Mathis, the big one. It's a real shame. He's been, a fantastic player for them for a very, very long period of time. I like how fitting it was that, he got a strip sack in his last game as a Colt, because that was his trademark whilst he was there. Lost the corner, Darius Butler. That may hurt depth a little, but he wasn't a big name. Some of those guys that they signed, Trent Cole, was clearly coming to the end of his career. He's gone. I don't think that'll particularly hurt them. Pat McAfee, the punter, retired to pursue comedy, which I thought was a strange one. He made his money. He was one of the better punters, so that will have an effect. But yeah, at the end, even a good punter, it's still a punter. It's a shame for the Colts, but they'll just bring in another. Eric Walden, it's just a guy. Quell Jackson, another one of those veteran players, played pretty well in his time there. He may be on his way back because there is a need at that position. Wouldn't be entirely shocked. These guys are all still out there. In terms of losses, there isn't, no one's really left. All their guys are out there. And then outside of Mike Adams, that will hurt. He's a solid veteran safety. Getting older, I can understand. His team needs to get younger, start looking to the future. He's gone to Carolina. And one of their backup linemen, or defensive lineman, Kerr, he's gone to the Broncos. I don't think that'll be a huge issue for them. So yeah, the Colts. Still don't think they're ready to compete. Now, the division is weak. If the Texans can't fix the quarterback position, then, depending what happens with the Titans, who I think look like an up-and-coming, promising kind of team, but you never know when they're going to get over that hurdle. Whereas with Luck, we've seen he's got the ability to drag mediocre teams to the playoffs. So if the Texans can't fix the quarterback spot, for me, the Colts would be the favourite by default of Andrew Luck. But I do reserve the right to, once I see the Titans, if they make any kind of improvement, they will become said favourite. Could be a very competitive division next year. It could be a garbage fire again. Difficult to know. Regardless, this team has that quarterback spot locked up. It's been sad seeing Andrew Luck wasted in this way. This is a guy that should be up there with Rodgers and Brady, competing for the Super Bowl every season. But I think these moves, again, while none of them are going to make headlines or be particularly exciting for the fan base necessarily, I think these are wise moves going in the right direction. The draft is going to be critical for this team. They're not going to be one of the more talented teams next year. That's going to remain the case. The roster is very thin. Still another 2 years away, I think, from having a team that Andrew Luck can confidently say, yep, we're going to be the class of the division. So, what do you guys think? Do you agree with me on the Colts? Do you think I'm being too harsh on them? Putting them in with those bottom of the barrel teams, I can see some Colts fans potentially being quite offended by that. I get it, but that's just because you've got Andrew Luck. Excuse the pun, but you're lucky to have him. His roster is poor. Grigson rightfully fired, which sounds harsh, but done a poor job there, to put it simply. Do you guys think that they're still in the hunt for a playoff spot? What do you think of the AFC South in general? It's certainly going to be one of the more difficult to predict divisions going into next season. None of these teams have been, world beaters. The Texans kind of winning the division by default over the last couple of seasons. How far do you think this team is away? What do you think they need? As I said, I think they need a little bit of everything. Do you think it's a bit better than that? Is there some players that I'm perhaps missing out on? As I said, I only see 5 or 6 talented players, or talented young players on this roster. Things are that bad in my opinion. So just give me a shout, Twitter, the Facebook group, over the comments on Facebook. I'll do my best to get back to everyone. I think this is one of the more interesting teams to discuss at this point. And, it'd be cool to have some conversations with you guys. Like, share, subscribe, check out the Patreon, the Twitter, all that good stuff. Be thoroughly appreciated. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's been a pleasure as always. Thank you very much for your time, and go Bucks.